Have you ever felt that chilling moment when an ordinary night suddenly turns strange, when something you can't explain lingers just beyond the shadows? Tonight, I'm sharing with you 3 true stories that will make you think twice about the people you meet, the roads you travel, and even the places you choose to stay. Each one starts like any normal night, but ends with something far more disturbing. Watch closely, because the details matter. And if you've ever had a similar experience, share it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Story 1. Strange Roommate. I still remember the summer when I moved into a small apartment that I found through a Facebook group. It wasn't anything special, just a cheap place where I could stay for a couple of months while I figured things out. The only catch was that I had to share it with another tenant. His name was Chris. He was a student, soft-spoken, and came across as the kind of guy you wouldn't think twice about. At first, I actually felt relieved. After all, in a city full of strangers, ending up with a quiet roommate seemed like good luck. For the first week, everything felt perfectly normal. We exchanged a few polite conversations, cooked in the same kitchen, and went about our own lives. But slowly, little things began to chip away at that sense of comfort. At first, I brushed it off. My phone wasn't where I left it. My laptop lid was open when I was sure I had closed it. Small details that could easily be explained away. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I just forgot. That's what I kept telling myself. But then came the nights. More than once, I was woken up by the faint creaking of the floorboards in the hallway. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, almost cautious. I knew there were only 2 of us living there, and I could hear Chris's door shut from where I slept. Sometimes I'd hold my breath under the covers, convincing myself that maybe the old wood just shifted on its own. Still, my gut told me otherwise. The night that changed everything happened about 3 weeks in. I woke suddenly, without knowing why, and instinctively scanned the room. That's when my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I saw him. Chris. He wasn't asleep in his own room. He was standing in the corner of mine. His figure was barely visible in the shadows, but there was no mistaking him. He didn't move, didn't say a word. He just stood there, watching me, as if waiting for something. I remember my chest tightening, my mind racing to find an explanation. Was he sleepwalking? Was this some bizarre prank? I wanted to believe that. But nothing about his posture suggested confusion or accident. It felt deliberate. And in that moment, I realized the unease I had been ignoring wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. I forced myself to speak, breaking the silence. And only then did he slowly step back and leave, without saying anything. The sound of his door closing a moment later didn't bring relief. If anything, it confirmed what I had been afraid to admit. I was sharing my home with someone I no longer trusted. After that night, when I caught Chris standing silently in the corner of my room, I couldn't sleep the same way again. Every creak of the floor, every subtle draft of wind against the door, put me on edge. I started double-checking the locks, leaving my phone under the pillow, and even keeping a kitchen knife within reach. Though I hated that it had come to the point of time broke 9 5s. What unsettled me the most was not just the image of him staring, but the thought that he had probably done this before. The way he stood there too still, too aware, was not the movement of someone lost in sleepwalking. It was intentional. Days passed, and although I tried to act normal around him, I found myself studying his every move. He seemed friendly enough in daylight, But sometimes his eyes lingered too long, and his smile felt forced, like he was mimicking what he thought normal looked like. The real turning point came one afternoon when I was cleaning my room. I was tucking in the bed sheets and noticed something odd tucked between the headboard and the wall. It was small, black, and almost invisible unless you leaned close. At first, I thought it was a charger piece or maybe some loose wiring. But when I pulled it out, my stomach dropped a time .95s. It was a camera, a tiny, cheap-looking mini-cam. For a long moment, I just stared at it in my hand, my chest pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. A dozen thoughts collided at once. How long had it been there? What had it captured? Was Chris watching me every night? Not just standing in the corner, but recording me without my knowledge? The realization hit me like a wave. All those times my phone was moved, my laptop shifted, it wasn't my imagination. He had been tampering with my things, maybe even checking if I had noticed. When he came home that evening, I confronted him. I didn't plan it. The words just erupted out of me. I held the camera in front of his face and asked what the hell this was doing in my room. His reaction was infuriating. He tilted his head, time .65, feigned confusion, and muttered something like, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe the last tenant left it there." He wouldn't even look me in the eye. My hands were shaking, partly from anger, partly from fear. I pressed harder, told him this wasn't a coincidence, that I had been hearing him at night, that I'd seen him in my room. But he just kept denying. Time .65, as what about someone? His voice flat, emotionless, like he had rehearsed those excuses. I wanted to call the police, but something about the way he stood there, calm, unbothered, made me hesitate. It was as if he was daring me, silently warning me that no one would believe my story. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, until I finally stormed out just to breathe. The next morning, Chris was gone. His room was empty. No clothes, no books, no signs of him except for a few random objects he left behind, like he had vanished overnight. He didn't leave a note, didn't answer my calls, nothing, just disappeared. At first, I thought maybe he had panicked, afraid I'd report him. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettling it felt. Time, 0.95s. He didn't seem like someone who ran from mistakes. He seemed like someone who repeated them. A week later, I mentioned the situation to a mutual acquaintance who knew Chris from campus. Their reaction told me everything I needed to know. They weren't surprised. In fact, they sighed and said, "Yeah, you're not the first. He's been kicked out of a few places for being weird." When I pressed for details, they wouldn't say much. Just that other roommates had complained about the same kind of behavior, things going missing, doors opening at night, and in one case, cameras hidden in bedrooms. That was when it sank in. This wasn't about me alone. Chris had a pattern, and I had stumbled right into it. To this day, I don't know where he went or what he's doing now. And that's the part that unsettles me the most. Because someone like him doesn't just stop. He finds another place, another roommate, another victim. And every time I close my eyes at night, I can't help but wonder if he's out there right now, standing in the corner of someone else's room, watching, waiting. Story 2, people walking on the mountain road. It was one of those nights in Dalat, when the mist clings to your skin and the mountain air feels colder than you expect. Three of us, Dewey, and Huang Had decided on a whim to take our motorbikes out for a night ride along the winding mountain pass. The roads were empty, the usual tourist traffic long gone, and all we could hear was the steady hum of our engines echoing against the cliffs. At first, it felt freeing, almost peaceful. The kind of ride that clears your head and makes you forget about everything else. But that peace didn't last. Not long after we started climbing higher into the hills, Huang slowed down and pointed ahead. I followed his gesture and saw a figure walking along the opposite side of the road. At first, it didn't seem strange. People hike even at odd hours sometimes. But as we drew closer, the details sharpened, and that's when the unease set in. The man was dressed in a long black raincoat that reached almost to his ankles. A wide-brimmed hat covered most of his face. His head hung slightly forward, as if he was staring at the asphalt with each slow step. The strangest part? The sky above us was perfectly clear. No rain, not even fog heavy enough to justify wearing a raincoat. Yet here he was, moving steadily, like he had been walking for hours. As we passed him, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't explain why, but something felt wrong. Dewey swore under his breath and muttered, "Did you see that?" Huang just shook his head and focused on the road. But I knew we were all thinking the same thing. There was something unnatural about that man. I risked a glance in my mirror, half expecting to see nothing. Instead, I froze. He was still there. But not just standing. He was walking in the same direction we were riding, his pace impossibly matching ours. Our bikes weren't flying, but we were going fast enough that no ordinary person should have been able to keep up. Yet in the reflection, his dark figure never grew smaller. He stayed at the same distance, step after step, like a shadow glued to us. The silence between us grew heavier with every passing second. I remember gripping the handlebars tighter, torn between speeding up or stopping altogether. My mind searched for logical answers. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe the curve of the road made it look like he was following. But the longer I stared, the more I realized the truth. His legs didn't move naturally. There was no rhythm, no sway of the arms, no rise and fall of the shoulders. Just a stiff, mechanical stride that carried him effortlessly forward. Huang finally shouted over the roar of the engines, "Don't look back. Just go." And so we did. We twisted the throttles harder, the engines screaming as we tried to leave him behind. For a moment, I resisted the urge to glance in the mirror, but when I finally did, my heart dropped. He was still there, still walking, still keeping up. That was the moment I realized we weren't just sharing the road with some stranger. We were trapped in something we couldn't explain. And deep down, I knew this night was only the beginning. We kept riding, trying to shake off the unease, but the silence between the three of us grew heavier with every turn of the road. I could feel the tension in my grip on the handlebars, the way Dewey leaned forward like he wanted the bike to go faster, and the way Huang kept glancing into his mirrors no matter how many times I told him not to. Deep down, we all knew it. Something about this wasn't normal. The road began to narrow as we climbed higher. The trees leaned closer, the air colder, and the night darker than before. My headlight cut through the mist, but it never seemed bright enough. And every time I dared to check my mirror, that figure in the black raincoat was still there, still walking, still keeping up. His pace was impossible, his movement stiff. like he was being pulled forward by something unseen. Then came the curve. It was a sharp bend, the kind you can't take too quickly on a motorbike without risking your life. Huang, who was in front, leaned hard to the left, and we followed, the tires screeching slightly as we hugged the road. For a brief second, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe the bend would finally break whatever illusion this was. Maybe when we looked back, time 0.65 shots, the road would be empty. But fate had other plans. The moment we straightened out of the turn, Huang shouted. His voice cracked with fear. I jerked my head around and nearly lost control of the bike. Standing on the side of the road, no more than a few meters away, was the man in the raincoat. He wasn't behind us anymore. He was ahead, waiting. His body was angled toward us, but his head was twisted just enough to reveal his face. And what I saw will never leave me. His eyes. They were not normal eyes. They were pale, almost glowing, completely white with no pupils, wide open, staring without blinking. The kind of stare that doesn't just look at you, but through you. I felt my stomach drop, and a cold rush went through me like ice water in my veins. Instinct took over. I slammed the throttle, swerving to the opposite side of the road just to avoid passing too close to him. Dewey cursed under his breath, and Huang nearly toppled as he tried to speed past. None of us wanted to look, but curiosity forced me into one last glance. And in that instant, I swear I saw his lips curl not into a smile, not into a frown, but into something unnatural, time 0.95. Something that didn't belong on a human face. We didn't stop until the lights of Dalat City came into view. Even then, we parked in silence, our hands trembling, our breaths shallow, our hearts refusing to slow down. None of us wanted to admit what we had seen, because admitting it meant accepting that it was real. Days later, when the fear had dulled just enough for me to bring it up, I asked a local vendor about that stretch of road. I expected him to laugh it off, to tell me it was just my imagination or maybe a prank. Instead, his face grew serious, and he nodded slowly, as if he had heard this before. He told me that years ago, a man had died on that exact road during a stormy night. He had been walking home in the rain, hit by a car that never stopped. They said his body was found by the roadside, raincoat torn, eyes wide open, staring into the dark. The vendor lowered his voice, almost whispering. People still see him, he said. Always at night, always on that road, always walking. I didn't know what to say. All I know is that I haven't ridden that mountain pass again, and I don't think I ever will. Because some roads don't just take you somewhere. Some roads remember, and sometimes they make sure you remember too. Story 3. Night at the beach house. We had rented a small house by the coast for a friend's birthday. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old wooden place with a porch that faced the ocean. During the day, it was perfect sunlight pouring through the windows, music blasting, everyone laughing and running in and out with drinks in their hands. The air smelled of salt and sunscreen, and for a while it felt like one of those summer weekends you remember for years. But nights by the ocean have a different character. When the sun disappears, the same beach that feels playful and alive turns into something far more unsettling. The sound of waves grows heavier, almost too loud, and the darkness seems endless. By midnight, most of the group had gone to bed. leaving just 4 of us outside. Time .65s, half drunk, sitting on the porch with bottles of beer. It started quietly. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure moving along the sand. At first, I thought nothing of it. People sometimes walk the shore at night. Maybe it was a local fisherman or someone clearing their head. The figure was slow, almost dragging its feet, staying right where the water kissed the sand. I remember leaning forward, trying to make out more detail. But the moonlight was faint, and all I could see was a dark outline. Minutes passed, then more minutes, and that figure never moved beyond the same stretch of beach. It didn't sit, didn't pace, didn't turn toward us. Just stood there, staring out at the waves. The longer it stayed, the stranger it felt. My friend laughed nervously and said, "Probably some drunk who lost their way." But even he couldn't hide the unease in his voice. Half an hour slipped by, and the figure was still there, unmoving. My curiosity fought with my nerves. Finally, one of us decided to grab the flashlight from inside. "Let's just see who it is," he said, forcing a chuckle as if he didn't already regret the idea. We aimed the beam straight at the shoreline. For a split second, the light touched the figure, revealing just enough, a hint of shoulders, maybe a pale face. But then, just as quickly, the shape dissolved into the dark. Gone. We froze. The light swept across the sand again, but there was nothing there. No movement, no retreating footstep. Time 0.95s. The waves rolled in like always, erasing any trace of where the figure had stood. My skin prickled as the thought settled in. Had we imagined it? 4 of us saw the same thing, yet in the blink of an eye, it vanished. No one spoke for a while. The beers sat untouched. The night air, once pleasant, now felt heavy and cold. Deep inside, I knew we hadn't been looking at a simple passerby. Whatever stood on that beach with us that night didn't belong to the world we thought we understood. When the figure disappeared, we sat frozen on the porch, each of us silently replaying what we had just seen. The ocean roared steadily in the background, but somehow it felt too quiet around us, like the night was holding its breath. Nobody dared to finish their beer anymore. Eventually, someone muttered that it was late and maybe we should head inside. The others agreed, and we all stood up, trying to act casual even though every one of us felt the same nervous energy crawling under our skin. As we stepped back into the house, one of my friends suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes locked onto the ground just beneath the wooden porch, where the sand met the steps. At first, I didn't understand what he was staring at, but then I saw it too. Footprints. Not just 1 or 2, but dozens of them. Wet, heavy imprints pressed deep into the sand. Circling the porch in irregular loops. They didn't lead anywhere, not back to the shoreline, not toward the dunes, not even fading into the distance. They just looped around and around, as if someone had been pacing the same spot for hours. The strangest part? We had been sitting out there the whole time, and none of us heard footsteps that close. The sand was soaked, and the marks looked fresh, glistening under the dim light above the door. I felt my chest tighten. Whoever or whatever that figure was, it hadn't just been standing by the water. It had come closer, much closer. Panic set in, though none of us wanted to admit it. We locked the doors, pulled the curtains shut, and turned on every light in the house. For a long time, We sat in the living room without saying much, just listening. Every creak of the old wooden walls, every gust of wind against the windows, felt magnified. The ocean, once the reason we'd rented this place, now sounded menacing, its waves pounding like a warning. Sleep was out of the question. A couple of my friends tried, but I could hear them tossing and turning in their rooms. I stayed on the couch with the light on, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling, waiting for the night to end. It was one of the longest nights of my life. When dawn finally broke, we stumbled outside, half expecting the footprints to be gone. But they were still there. Dark, damp marks circling the porch like some obsessive ritual. Only now the morning light made them look even more out of place. We didn't bother finishing breakfast. Instead, we went straight to the caretaker of the property, an older man who managed a few of the houses in the area. When we described what we saw, we expected him to laugh, or maybe scold us for drinking too much. But his expression didn't change. He just nodded slowly, almost like he had been waiting for us to bring it up. Then he said, in a tone so calm it unsettled me even more, "Don't worry. Everyone sees him once. The man from the sea." He didn't elaborate, and maybe he didn't need to. That single sentence explained enough, and yet nothing at all. We pressed for details, but he only shrugged and said it was part of living by the coast. Some nights, the ocean keeps its own company, he added, and sometimes it lets us see who it has taken. The words lingered in my mind long after we packed up and left. To this day, I don't know what we witnessed. Maybe it was the ghost of someone lost to the waves, condemned to wander the shore forever. Or maybe it was something older, something the ocean keeps hidden until it chooses to reveal. All I know is this: every time I hear the crash of waves at night, I remember those footprints circling the porch, and the figure staring out at the sea. And I wonder if the ocean still remembers us, too.